C is for capitalism and culture. What is capitalism, anyway? Capitalism, that's like democracy, isn't it? And aren't the enemies of capitalism the opponents of democracy? Didn't we defeat them in the Cold War? Actually, capitalism and democracy are two very different things. Democracy is, essentially, the idea that people should have control over their lives. The power should be shared by all rather than concentrated in the hands of a few.
You say it, brother.
Shut up. And capitalism is, in fact, one of the least democratic economic systems. In a democracy economy, each member of the society would have an equal say in how resources are used and how work is done. But in the capitalist economy, in which all resources are private property and everyone competes against each other for them, most resources end up in the control of a few people. Today, read corporations. Those people can decide how everyone else will work, since most of the others can't live without earning money from them. They even get to determine the physical and psychological landscape of society, since they own most of the land and control most of the media. And at bottom, they aren't really in control either, for if they let their guard down and stop working to keep ahead, they will quickly be at the bottom of the pyramid with everyone else. That means nobody truly has freedom under the capitalist system. Everyone is equally at the mercy of the laws of competition. How does capitalism work? Here's how the free market is supposed to work. People are free to seek their fortunes as they choose, and the ones who work the hardest and provide the greatest value to society are rewarded with the greatest wealth. But this system has a crucial flaw. It doesn't actually offer equal opportunities for everyone. Success in the free market depends almost entirely on how much wealth you already have.
Greetings, this is the Garage Autonomist. This might be a long one, so I apologize in advance. I want to give my clarity and my political views, a little bit of my political background. I want to talk about being a libertarian socialist and how that plays into being a black liberationist, which for me will always come first. In the low bar, I have only provided some basic links to some of the movements and definitions to ideologies I will be referencing. Hopefully, they will help. I'm putting everything into plain language in this episode because often radicals have a tendency to speak in academic ease. Because unfortunately for them, they are politicized on a college campus, and in a lot of ways they are indoctrinated there, which opens them up to not having their beliefs challenged rigorously. And they have no idea how to speak to normal, everyday people about politics without being condescending or alienating. The good news for me is that I have never been politicized on a college campus, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Now let's start with the here and now. I'm a libertarian socialist who also happens to believe that the black community's approach to organizing themselves for liberation from class exploitation, from police brutality, and internalized racism, i.e. self-hatred, sexism, and homophobia, can happen independent of voting for Democratic Party candidates or Republicans, that the black community can create independent social programs such as food co-ops, breakfast and lunch programs for children in need, technology classes, and that they can form self-defense militias. Also, that we can provide our own support groups for various psychological issues that people might be struggling with, and community gardening. Activities such as these would convert the black community, as we see it, as an autonomous zone, free from state and corporate interference and control. You might say that this sounds like a lot of pie-in-the-sky utopian nonsense. But let me point out the historical instances where African Americans have done this work at different times and in bits and pieces. Were it not for the government's violent interference, the original and true Black Panther Party created and ran with community support the breakfast and lunch program, self-defense classes, the Head Start program, and after-school programs. This was done by donations from within the black community and sales of the party's paper, among other things. The young people who were members of the party, plus volunteers, is what kept these programs going until the state destroyed the party with terror tactics.
The existence of a secret FBI counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO was an illegal operation set up to destroy the Black Panthers. It used widespread bugging and surveillance, as well as a dirty tricks campaign against Panther leaders. Newly obtained documents reveal the scope of COINTELPRO operations against the Black Panther Party, the BPP. One directive orders:
officers are instructed to submit imaginative and hard-hitting counterintelligence measures aimed at crippling the BPP.
The Nation of Islam's drug rehab program. Yes. From Malcolm X to any woman or man coming out of the penal system or the streets, the program, to my knowledge to this day, is offered as an alternative to clean and sober someone up who is ready to become clean and sober. Although I will never agree with most of what the Nation of Islam stands for, I will always buy a paper in hopes that that money helps support the drug rehab program. Urban gardening and urban farming, headed by activists such as Ron Finley, known as the gangster gardener of South Central LA farms, or Karen Young, Washington in New York, or La Finca del Sur, a South Bronx community farm, provides not only organic food source alternatives for working class communities of color, but provides activities for those living in the community to see what it means to build communities. As a libertarian socialist, I see myself as a person in this world and as a member of human society on the larger scale who believes that we will have to overthrow both the state and corporations to destroy capitalism. However, in its place, I want a non-hierarchical society that will implement socialist programs such as universal health care, people voluntarily working together by reciprocal exchange of resources and services for mutual benefit. This, of course, is known as mutual aid, and workers, not bosses, who have control over the work, over the workplace, and over production. Most of these modes of this proposed society would be voted on and implemented by general assemblies, and obviously each decision needs to be evaluated as to whether a true authoritarian force will be needed. But in most times, we should not, towards not having to need authority at all. Ultimately, the societal goal will need to work even then to dismantle this near-state structure in favor for a more non-state syndicalism, a system of economic organization in which industries and society are owned and managed by the workers and all people, not the rich, not the bosses, police, and the military. So in essence, I am actually an anarchist before I'm a socialist or a communist, as I have been labeled by some of my detractors and their handlers.
In order to understand anarchism, the first thing we're going to do is to point out where anarchism would be located on the political scale. This is the commonly used scale of economic left and right, but there's also another dimension to it. This political scale shows not only economic left and right, but also social authoritarian and libertarian. This leaves us with roughly 4 fields on the scale: the authoritarian left, the authoritarian right, the libertarian right, and the libertarian left, which is the one we'll be focusing on in this video, as this is where we'll find the anarchist ideology. In order to understand how this scale works, we can for example see that Barack Obama and John McCain both are found in the authoritarian right field, while for example Ralph Nader would be found in the libertarian left field. Near the authoritarian limit we find Adolf Hitler, while Milton Friedman would be in the libertarian right field and Joseph Stalin in the upper authoritarian left field. It is on the very bottom of this scale that we find anarchism and anarcho-capitalism. Anarchism is one out of 2 ideologies categorized under libertarian socialism, where one is syndicalism or anarcho-syndicalism, which rather than being an actual ideology, more is a practice of labor union organization. The other ideology being anarchism. Anarchists strive to abolish both the state and capitalism, as anarchists see the state as a capitalist institution, an institution whose primary goal is to uphold the class society, that is, the power of the corporate and political elite over the masses. Anarchists do acknowledge, though, that the state sometimes will be pushed to act against the direct interest of the elite, for instance through financing healthcare, dental care, or upholding the laws of 8 hours working day. which is in the direct interest of the masses. But anarchists knows that a government with power of providing these things also has the power of taking them away, and thus anarchists don't rely on the promise that the state will be just, a fact that anarchists often has experienced at first hand.
Although many white anarchists might ask why I rep so hard for the Black Panthers, since they believe in state communism and back in the day they upheld Mao Zedong as a revolutionary leader, my answer is that as a libertarian socialist, I can uphold whoever I like. I can walk and chew gum at the same time, and I know how to throw out the bathwater without dumping the baby. It is not a contradiction to uphold black radicals who have different revolutionary end games from mine, if they also have great ideas or did work that I find important to adapt. In this day and age, when so much was fought for only for it to have been quickly reversed and erased, we can no longer afford to play rigid politics like that.
Well, the politics of Black Autonomy and myself come out of the anarchist movement, but they are the politics specifically related to blacks and people of color as a wing of anarchism, or as an independent movement. It's independent in the sense that people of color in this country are subjected to a different kind of oppression and exploitation than whites are. It's also an understanding of the nature of white supremacy as a means of special oppression of peoples of color under this system, whether we're talking about slavery or other forms of oppression that peoples of color, that blacks and Africans have been subjected to. And so the idea for us was that we wanted to have this movement which was related to some of the ideas of anarchism, some of the ideas of anti-authoritarian thought, but not so much anarchist politics in the sense that we're part of or linked to a movement that's only concerned about lifestyleism.
Black autonomy. Black autonomy, for me, is a new face of black liberation. It promotes class-based, grassroots, anti-authoritarian struggle. Those who have laid the theoretical groundwork, like Lorenzo Gamboa Irvin, Jonina Abram, Ashanti Alston, Kwesi Balagoon, Kai Lumumba Barrow, Greg Jackson, and Martin Sostre, have given us the material to study from, and it is Lorenzo Gamboa Irvin and Jonina Abram who are putting the ideas to work with their movement, the Black Autonomy Federation, what is also known as Let's Organize the Hood. The Irvins have organized against police brutality in communities in Tennessee and Michigan. They refuse to organize for crumbs given by Wall Street politicians like Clinton or Sanders, firmly placing them as anti-capitalist. They want a society that is run by those who are the true producers, the workers, not the bosses. So is black autonomy a fancy word for black anarchism? I don't claim to be a black anarchist or an anarchist for the following two reasons. One, anarchists have, like most movements and organizations on the left radical spectrum, have always been predominantly white. The black autonomists I've mentioned earlier have all encountered the attitudes that, quote-unquote, race doesn't matter, and so therefore these individuals have all walked away from anarchist circles. Second, due to my personal choices, my lifestyle contradicts what most anarchists are truly about, which is not to be part of an exploitative system to begin with. I truly respect this position, as exemplified by the Ex-Workers Collective and others, but I cannot take that plunge at this stage in my life. Plus, the true anarchist circles have always taken a rather anti-activist position. That is why I favor the black autonomous / libertarian socialist path, because these positions are about fighting and organizing for change. We will have to see the end game of overthrow first before we can get to the point of doing whatever we want as raceless human beings at play more than work. So now we come to the last bit of this video, which is how I came to my own political awakening, part 1. Not to get geeky, but just like Force-sensitive people, They either become Jedi or Sith or agents of either side. I, like most ideologues and activists, are seemingly sensitive to the conditions that affect our surroundings. So we read and are curious as to why things are the way they are. I can remember watching the last death throes of the Vietnam War played on CBS Morning News and Patty Hearst's rich girl drama unfold while eating breakfast. Then in the 80s, as boys were flying gang colors in South Park, Houston, Texas, I sat in the library of my junior high for hours, studying the history of the Vietnam War and the history of the movement that opposed it. As the mid to late 80s came and went, I got into reading anarchist and Marxist literature, sitting in the kitchen where I worked, between dinner rushes, listening to the Dead Kennedys as hardcore punk's Dusk gave way to thrash metal's Dawn, all the while looking at my customers gorge themselves on chicken fried steaks while Reaganomics bled them dry. Then by 1989, after just graduating, getting my associate's degree in electronic engineering, and spending the last year learning who Malcolm X was and studying his speeches, I started doing community work around anti-apartheid and police brutality. I joined this young socialist group and deciding that both black nationalism and anarchism didn't seem as real as being an actual worker who was also a Marxist-Leninist. Later, I joined a citywide coalition to help get a man by the name of Clarence Brantley off of death row, and we were successful in doing that. What was 2 years before the first Gulf War felt like 10 years of meeting some of the brightest, passionate, angry, loving, mean, opportunistic, and depressing human beings, and also a learning experience that shaped my young life, and I still feel it touches me to this day. I threw myself into the work and the life so fucking hard that I burned myself out way too quickly, when there have been others who have done the work decades before me and decades after. In the next episode, there will be my reflections and the aftermath of the activist years. Also to answer some questions that reactionaries love to ask radical leftists, such as how can one believe in Marxist/socialist/anarchist ideals when it didn't work in some countries, and what are the solutions that today's radical leftists have? So until then, this is the Garage Autonomist.